Good afternoon, students. Today's lecture is devoted to pragmatics of translation, the reproduction of pragmatics in translation. We'll consider today the questions, the notion of pragmatics, the dependence of translation on pragmatic direction of a text, and the pragmatic functions of social linguistic factors. Words in language are related to certain reference which they designate, and other words of this some language with which they make up syntactic units. These relationships are called semantic and syntactic respectively. Words are also related to the people who use them. To the users of the language, words are not indifferent, unemotional objects or ideas. The people develop a certain attitude to the words they use. Some of the words acquire definite implications. They evoke a positive or negative response. They are associated with certain theories, beliefs, likes or dislikes. There are noble words like honor, dignity, freedom, and low words like infamy, cowardice, betrayal. Words can be nice or ugly, attractive or repulsive. Such relationships between the word and its users are called pragmatic. The pragmatic implication of a word is an important part of its meaning that produces a certain effect upon the receptor. Of even greater significance is the pragmatic aspect of speech units. Every act of speech communication is meant for a certain receptor. It is aimed at producing a certain effect upon him. In this respect, any communication is an exercise in pragmatics. The translator on the first stage of the translating process tries to get the information contained in the original. For that, he must have the same knowledge which the native speaker possesses. On the second stage, the translator strikes for providing the comprehension of the original by a receptor of translation. A receptor belongs to a different language community. He has different culture, and such differences cause difficulties for the full understanding of initial text. So, the task of the translator is to eliminate them, making necessary changes in the text of translation. Correlated words in different languages may produce this similar effect upon the users. For example, a word ambition in English is just a name of a quality which may evoke any kind of response, positive, negative, or neutral. Its Russian counterpart, ambitia, is definitely not a nice word. It has just negative meaning. For example, the voters put an end to the general's political ambitions. Избиратели положили конец политическим амбициям генерала. Ambitia retains the negative implication of the original in the sentence. In the second sentence, the boy's ambition was to become a pilot. Мечтой мальчика было стать летчиком. And the second sentence, we cannot translate it as ambitsias. So the word ambitia in Russian has negative meaning. That's why we use here the word мечта. So there are some other words, such words as idealism or nationalism, often have a positive effect in the English text. And they are rendered into Russian not as idealism or nationalism, but as служение идеалам, бескорыстие and национальное самосознание, национальные интересы. When we consider not just separate words, but a phrase or number of phrases in a text, the problem becomes more complicated. The communicative effect of a speech unit does not depend on the meaning of its components alone, but involves considerations of the situational context and the previous experience. A report that John has run 100 meters in 9 seconds will pass unnoticed by some people and create a sensation with others who happen to know that it is a wonderful record-breaking achievement. The dependence of translation on pragmatic problems is connected with genre peculiarities of the original and the type of receptors for whom it is oriented. Translators come across many problems in translating the pragmatic potential of the works of fiction and poetry. These works in any language are addressed to people, to readers speaking the language of an author. But they are of general human value, and so they are translated into other languages. We meet in these works descriptions of traditions, customs, events, names of national dishes, articles of clothes, and so on. These pragmatic differences between SL and TL need making necessary changes in the text of translation to let the target receptor to get an adequate understanding of it. For example, the strike movement in Spain is on the increase, Newsweek reports. It is translated as «Как сообщает журнал Newsweek, в Испании растет забастовочное движение». As you see, the translator added the word «journal» because the target receptor may not know that Newsweek is a magazine. Or the Prime Minister spoke a few words from a window in number 10. Translation. Премьер-министр произнес несколько слов из окна своей резиденции. Here, number 10 is replaced by the word резиденция. Because Downing Street number 10 may not be clear for some target receptors. Specific problems are connected with the pragmatic aspect of texts oriented towards a receptor speaking a different language. These are various educational and propaganda texts, advertisements of exported goods, and so on. So the translator is assigned his task and paid for it by the people for whom his work is not an end in itself, but an instrument for achieving some other ends. Aware of this, the translator tries to make his work meet these extra translational requirements, introducing appropriate changes in the text of translation. An important role in providing the pragmatic adequacy of translation text belongs to social linguistic factors. Dialects may cause additional difficulties for proper understanding of a translation text. Lexical elements of local and regional dialects are not transmitted in translation. The use of dialect forms in the original may have a double character. On the one hand, the whole text may be written in a dialect of SL. In this case, a dialect is presented as a ways of communication used by the source. The translation of it will be carried out like from any other national language. On the other hand, dialect forms may be used in a text with the purpose of language characteristics of some people. In this case, the reproduction of dialect peculiarities is not used as they don't carry out their identification function. For example, he has a good here. That's a Cockney dialect. The translator, when he translates, first corrects it, changes into a normal language, then gives translation. He has a good ear. У него хороший слух. Specific problems are connected with the reproduction of foreigner speech in the original text. The contaminated forms can be used with some purpose or without it. When used without the purpose, these contaminated forms just speak of the sources belonging to a different language community. A translator finds the correct forms for these contaminated ones and translates them. In case when these forms are used with a definite purpose, they are used to point at foreigner speech and they become one of the ways of carrying out the pragmatic potential of the text. Therefore, the reproduction of pragmatic functions of these forms is the translator's task. The methods of reproduction of contaminated speech are rather conditional. For example, Chinese contaminated text. We blingy beer, now you play. Моя принесла пиво, твоя теперь платить. That's all. Thank you for your attention.